All right, we're picking back up where we left off. Bryce is brand new to archery and we're literally walking him through. We talked through the first two fundamentals of the shot process, stance and grip in the first part of this series. Now we're gonna move on to two other fundamentals. Bryce has had a little bit of time to just work on those two. I'd wanna start out by saying, if you're teaching someone or if you're new and you're working on this archer's box that I had talked about and you draw your feet on the ground, another thing that you can do is write these steps down. You know, put them straight in front of you. You can write them right there where you'll be able to look at them and go through them. And we might as well move right in to the next one, which is going to be your shoulder. Okay. So the front shoulder, this is going to be number 3. The front shoulder is such, honestly, a freaking pain in the ass. The front shoulder has way too much range of motion in regards to if you don't pay attention to it, it can be in a different place all the time. And the front shoulder really is the key to an archery shot either being easy or being hard. Because as an archer, when I go through my process and I'm acquiring my trigger or letting off my safety, depending on the type of release I'm shooting, and I'm starting to pull through my shot or add a little bit more pull to the back wall of the bow, when I'm doing that and it goes off really easy and it almost surprises me and I feel like my shot went off too soon, that's a perfect shot because your anatomy was so in line that you aren't having to muscle through that activation. Your anatomy and your bone structure is doing it. And the position of this front shoulder is the key. Because this front shoulder can be down, this front shoulder can be up, this front shoulder can be back, and it can be anywhere in between. So the shoulder is such a critical thing to think about. And again, we've talked about, does it look right? Does it feel right for each and every one of these fundamentals? So for the front shoulder, what I have to tell everybody right off the get-go is what I'm looking for when it comes to shoulder position is I'm looking for a basic T formation, okay? And honestly, that T right there is a person, okay? So I'm looking for that front shoulder to be in that T formation. And when people say, well, what's perfect archery technique? Perfect archery technique, if I was shooting that way, perfect archery technique is, and if I was gonna like take a picture of someone that looked really perfect and comfortable shooting a bow, all they would really have to do is raise their arms up to the side, tell them to bend their release hand to the chest, and then invert it to the side of the face and look towards the target. If there was a bow in this picture, it would kind of look like you know what you're doing. You know, and if you look at really good archers, most of them have that formation. Now, you're an athlete, so I want to explain this to you because normally when I get to this part of shot process, people that have been watching a lot of archers start to have questions. Well, I saw so-and-so have it this way, and I've seen so-and-so do it this way. So one of the things that I like to do about this point as an instructor teaching someone is I like to talk about the exceptions to the rule. Listen, there's always athletes that are exceptions to the basic fundamentals, right? There's Bryce was a wrestler, so you know there's probably people that set up a half Nelson totally wrong that were like the best ever. But you're like, how do they do it? That's just how they do it. They're one of the best. There's no one else like them. They're the exception to the rule. Embrace it. They figured it out. Tiger Woods golf swing, you know, hey, just embrace it. John Daly's golf tactics. Like, listen, you can't teach that again. That's just who it is. And you got to love those people. So are there archers where the front shoulders, you know, really high and then the hips start to cock back and they're in this position? Certainly there are. But they are also the exception. They're not, that technique is not repeatable to the broad spectrum of athletes. And so I really boiled this down to that. So I look for the basic T formation, and really what I look for is, well, I guess I got to draw a regular person here. So what I look for when I see this, and I'm a horrible drawer, by the way. What I look for is I'm looking for a few things. I'm looking for that T formation. So I'm looking shoulder, shoulder, elbow, wrist, hip, hip, foot, foot. Okay? So I can literally draw through these. Rear arm is also going to be parallel to the front. Okay? Now, if you want to shoot a super relaxed elbow and this dot comes down then back up, where do you think that shoulder is going to want to go as it fatigues? It's going to want to come up. You've already made this triangle and it's going to want to go out of position. So when that front shoulder is down and the scapula is forward, now it's in line with the elbow and also with that wrist, and it's going to be able to maintain better position, and you're going to have your natural anatomy to pull against without breaking down. Same thing's true here. One of the things with stance, when you look down at your feet, is you're wanting to make sure your feet are under your hips, right? So if all of a sudden you look down and you realize when you're starting to pull your bow, this shoulder's coming up, usually when this triangle changes, that triangle changes too. So some people, they'll raise to the target, this shoulder already goes in this position, and then the hips go forward as they're trying to thrust through, and now they've totally changed. And this is now going to be like this, then over here, and all this starts to get out of whack, okay? So when we talk about the front shoulder and does it look right, the very first thing, after I go stance, grip, now what I'm thinking is my eyes go here to my shoulder, and I'm making sure that this front shoulder is down and relaxed, and I'm making sure the front shoulder is over the front foot. Okay? If I look at my shoulder and I realize my shoulder's behind my hip already, I've already hitched, and so I've already started a poor technique. So when I talked to you earlier about relaxing that front arm, I really try to pretend that there's a slight weight on this front shoulder and it's pulling to my foot. So I actually have a little bit more weight on the front of my foot so that that front shoulder can be down. And I want to just raise my bow to the target, just like when earlier when I had you just raise up like that. I want you to raise your bow to the target, and I want you to mimic pulling the release hand back and maintaining that T formation like that. So for right now, we don't need a bow or a grip, so let's just start back, step in. Number one is going to be your stance. Does it look right? Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, does it feel right?
Yep.
All right, grip. Tell that bow to stop, 45, imagine your wrist being bent back. Go ahead and take your release hand and pretend like you're holding your string. And right here is your target. So let's go ahead and raise that bow hand up to the target. Good job, good job. So this shoulder right here is down and forward. That's great. Now I'm gonna have you relax this again. Reset. Okay, so when you're going through the shot routine, you're saying, does it look right? Okay, you looked at your feet, then you looked at your hand. See how easy it is to just peek to that shoulder, to see that that shoulder's down? That's so important, and I'll tell you why. So let's go ahead and do one more time, go through your shot routine. What's number one?
Stance.
Number two?
Grip.
Awesome. Lost your mic cover. Okay. Go ahead and raise that up to the target. Awesome job. Shoulders down and forward. Great, dude. Okay, great. It's your first time on camera, so I'll fix you here. There you go. Maybe. All right. Okay. Now what I do as an instructor is I typically stand in front of the student to show this, but I show the students the importance of the front shoulder and how that position affects the scapula. So I'm just going to kind of draw this here quickly, and I'm actually going to draw someone shooting the other direction. So they're shooting that way, Bryce. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you've got two scapulas here, right? In your back. Got two shoulder blades. So when we make a proper archery technique, once we're at full draw, this rear elbow is gonna kind of pull back towards that back wall a little bit harder. It's gonna pull back. And as that elbow pulls back, this scapula right here is gonna start to slide over this direction. And you've got your spine right there. If this front scapula is down and forward, then there's going to be a space between that scapula and your spine. And that allows this to slide over to that. Okay? However, if this shoulder is high and this scapula is back like that, this scapula will not have the room to slide there because there's going to be muscle and bone hitting each other like this, and it's going to prevent that pulling through. So for this demonstration, I'm going to face this way, pretend like I'm shooting that way. So I'm going to have, you're probably better off behind me, Caleb. Bryce, I'm going to have you set your hands on my back, and I'm going to tell you exactly where to put them so I can, okay, up a little higher. Okay, in just slightly. All right, right there is good. So if I was going to go through my shot routine, look down at my stance, now my grip, this shoulder's down. I'm sure you can feel it with your left hand. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to raise that to the target, and then I draw back. Okay? Now if I want to execute a perfect archery shot, I'm just going to pull a little bit harder like this. Can you feel the right side moving?
Yeah.
Okay, now with your left thumb, just kind of push it onto my spine a little bit, and you can now move it a little left, and you can feel there's not any like mass there. Yeah. Okay, it's smooth, it's flat. The scapula is forward. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something slightly different. Go ahead and put your hands on my back, same place. Okay, now I'm going to do what a lot of people do in archery at the beginning, and that's they raise up, they draw back. Okay, so now what do you feel with your left thumb? A big knot, right? And so if I'm trying to pull, I can't, right? There's no room because this one slid back, this one slid over, and there's muscle and bone mass in between. So later on, if you're ever going through your shot routine and you feel like you're pulling your bow in half, but the shot isn't activating, you can think about your shoulder. And if you feel it's collapsed, just cancel the shot. Okay? This brings me into a really important thing that during this middle third of the instruction, I talk about a few other little details. In the beginning, I talk about, does it look right? Does it feel right? Okay, now what I'm going to talk about is whether or not you can cancel a shot if you ever have something in these steps that aren't correct. Because these are a system, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If at any time, anything that was done prior is determined that it doesn't feel right or it doesn't look right, it automatically demands a reset to the entire process, okay? Because if you do all this and then you're like looking through your PEEP and you kind of sitting here and you realize, holy cow, my shoulder's almost on my cheek. You're not going to be able to force that down and get it into position once you've got the load of all that on you. So the best thing you can do is be like, dude, I look like crap right now. Let my bow down, reset, relax those shoulders, and drop that shoulder down a little bit more and go through the process, okay? So you want the basic T formation. The shoulder needs to be down and forward. Okay? Now, for the shoulder, once you've pulled the bow and the bow stops and you move into the next thing, which is going to be your anchor position, if that thing's in the right place, keep going. If it stops and then you're coming over to your anchor and you realize this thing feels wrong, just put your finger on the safety, let the bow down, shake it off, and reset. As a new archer, the front shoulder and the pulling arm are going to be the two things that fatigue. And you will develop these muscles very, very fast. My recommendation to any new student is going to be take a few shots, pull, and return. Shorter amounts at the beginning and then more rest in between is going to be a very good way to start to maintain the formation. Because remember, if you're not maintaining technique, then you're going to start to break down, your sight's going to start darting all over the place, and you're going to start to want to like force the shot to happen, which is a very negative thought process to have. Okay, I'm going to have you do this right now with just this release trainer. You can just hold this with your finger because I'm just going to have you go through your routine, get your grip where you want it, and you can just raise that up and kind of feel where your front shoulder is. All right, now this, slide it up. If you have space under there, that's going to cause up and down variation on impacts, okay? Good job, dude. Very good. Okay, lower it back down. And just remember, whenever you have a little bit more weight on that front foot during the drawing part of your cycle, this front shoulder will sit over that front foot better, and it's less likely that you'll hitch. Hitching is the number one thing women, kids, anyone who's trying to pull more weight than what they're able to, they push the hips forward and they lift and pull back, and the front shoulder is just completely out of place. So go ahead and do a few more dry runs with that. Very good. Very, very good. I like it. All right. Okay, number 4 is going to be anchor position. So when it comes to the anchor position part of this, you have to recognize whether or not the student is familiar with a release aid. Are you familiar with a release aid? Not really. So at this point, you kind of have to go through how to hold the release, how to function with the release, and I'm going to do that with Bryce, and then you got to talk about how to hold a release and how to function a release. Okay, it's time then. All right. So for this part of the lesson, when we talk about anchor position, this is when I would hand a release to any student and talk with them about it. I'm going to talk with you about how to hold this and how to use it, and this is all really important before you talk about the anchor position. Because he's never shot, we're going to talk about all this. So I got you have a pretty big hand though, I got you a mini for now. Sorry about that. Your hands look bigger than mine. But I actually like a mini because I can't go too deep. So I practice with a mini a lot when I'm not using gloves. Okay, so let's set this down for right now, and I want to talk with you just about this release aid. So I'm going to start him on a silverback. This is a tension activated release. Okay, most important thing with this right here is your safety. You have to hold your thumb completely down on that anytime you pull the bow backwards or anytime you're going to let the bow down, okay? So safety. What happens if you don't have the safety when you do that? Go off. It's going to go off, all right? So if you ever hear me yelling, safety, 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 it means you're thinking about everything except that. But I really love this. A tension activated release, if you're brand new and you have no habits, this will totally change your archery game, and it'll put you light years ahead of people who have developed bad habits. Because the release hand and what the brain is thinking on activation, it really separates archers. Like in the game of archery, there are people that trust a float and they're on a very high level, and then there's everybody else that doesn't trust a float and they anticipate when the trigger goes off, and you're going to have really awesome days and really crappy days. Whereas if you're just focusing on fundamentals and pulling through, trusting the float and pulling through, you're going to be good to go. So with this release, has a hole in it. The index finger goes in that hole. Your middle finger is going to go on the next hole, okay? The next thing is when you hold this and you take your hand and you curl your fingers around like this, just like if you were trying to hold on to a door that was open and you were trying to hold on to it. I want you to curl your fingers around it without changing the shape of your hand. Okay, so I don't want you going brass knuckle style to where you're like this, because this is going to be your anchor. And a fist on your face, at least any fist that's been on my face, has never felt good. So I'm going to prevent you from doing that. So I'm going to have you index finger in, and I'm just going to have you work on shaping the hand like that. And this is important because when that hand's flat, I can have my thumb on this safety, then I can slowly let off the safety, and I can move my thumb around, and I'm not changing the shape of my hand. This will be important. Less movement is more. All right, so go ahead and get familiar with that thing. Now this is a lanyard. It's highly recommended for newbies, just because if you let that thing go by accident, it will at least prevent you shooting that through your bow. Good job. Okay, you feel the safety?
Yeah.
It's got to be all the way down. Nice. Okay, so when you're holding this release, you see how it creates this separation between your index finger and your middle finger? Mm-hmm. So right there, you've got that separation. Your jawline is going to fit right there. So I'm going to bring this, good job. Yep, that's a good job. I'm going to lift this elbow up a little bit more because I'm picky. Yep, so that's where you're going to be, okay? Now, depending on your student and what they look like when they're doing that, a lot of times I'll have them maintain their position. Why don't you step in your box, actually? And let's just do a dry run. Stance. Look good, feel good? Mm-hmm. Grip. Mimic it. Yep, good. Raise the bow to the target. Soften that elbow a little bit. Yep. If that elbow is hyperextended, you see how it forces that up too?
Yeah.
Okay, so just drop it back down, reset. All right. Thumb in a 45. Good. Bring that up. elbow soft. There you go. Way better. See the difference?
Yeah.
It's probably way less tension on you there too. Okay, now this release is going to be forward and you're going to pull this back. So it's going to pull back, the bow will stop, and then I'm going to have you, bring the V over to that jawline. That looks great right there, Bryce. That's awesome. Go ahead and relax this out of the way for now. Stay looking at the target. So if I was anchoring, this is what I would feel. Here's my index finger right on that jawline, and then the middle finger is kind of in your cheek well, like right on your gum, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so like that, when my bow stops and I come over, that's what I feel. Now, watch this. If you start to feel ring finger or pinky, what do you think's happening with the release hand? You're really inverting, okay? The opposite of that is, let's say this comes over and you just come like this. What do you feel is not there?
The middle finger.
Correct, yep. So if you're flat, then your middle finger won't be touching. But if you've got those two right there, then you're going to be in a perfect place. And here's what's important about that. Go ahead and mimic all that one more time. Okay, good job. So this arrow is going to be right in front of that loop right there, everybody. And what's cool about that is when you look at this anchor position, this arrow is now positioned between his chin and his lip. And there's a lot of clearance here. The only thing that's really interfering with that arrow would be this part of his face slightly on the inside. So that's going to be just sitting right there. There's perfect clearance around that arrow, and that's such an awesome, awesome position to be in. Okay, go ahead and relax for a second. Drop your arms out, step out of your box, get comfortable. Okay, so for anchor position, does it look right? Does it feel right? When I grab my release and I'm raising my bow, obviously I want that shoulder down, so at this point I'm going to start to pull on my string. I'm looking, does my hand look right? Because if I'm brass knuckled and I see a fist coming back, I'm knowing right now I've already done it wrong. Obviously if your thumb's not on the safety for that particular release, same thing, right? So you can look at it right here and make sure that that hand's correct. And then as you draw back and that hand stops because you hit the back wall of your draw length, you're then just going to try to bring that over to that position. I don't want you to get in the habit of like trying to like figure it out so much. When you were just mimicking that, that was really, really good technique without knowing it. So I've got this release trainer here. We measured his draw length earlier, is 29. What I did, because this is going to get pulled on a little bit, again, draw length's measured 1 3/4 inches from the pivot point. Pivot point's here, so add 1 3/4 inches. I've measured from this loop to the pivot point, and that's just over 27 inches, which would then make this essentially a 29-inch release trainer for you. So I'm going to hand you this. This is going to kind of be your bow for now. And this is a little bit tricky because on a silverback, this jaw is open just because the way to get it to open is like when you're pulling through your shot. So you need to be able to load it on and off a D-loop the way this functions. So you kind of have to just learn to use your middle finger to make sure that kind of stays in that until there's a little bit of tension on there. So go ahead and step into your box first and go through your shot routine. Stance, good. Imagine you're looking down at that grip, good. Okay, raise that bow to the target, nice. Okay, now go ahead and just kind of get your hand. I know you're not pulling the bow back, but I want you just to focus on the anchor portion of this. So, feel a little short?
Yeah.
That's hyperextended. Yep. Okay, now it's different. Okay, now one of the things that you're doing right here, normally if I was working with a student, I would have a picture so I could snap a picture of this. But can you feel that this elbow's kind of going down?
Yeah.
in a way. Have you ever broke this arm or anything?
No.
Okay. So try to get that elbow up a little bit more, because imagine this rear line, I want parallel to that front line, okay? And here's the other thing. I'm gonna have you just lower that a little bit more. Now, when he touched my back earlier, he could feel where my scapula was. So if this elbow is down like this, Bryce, you would have to pull with more of this because you're tipped down. And if you were to pull, this is probably going to come out and away when it went off. Okay, now if you lift that elbow up a little bit more, you see how where I'm pointing my finger? There's a little bit more. That right there is actually the muscle that you'll use later when you're pulling this elbow back towards me. So just lifting that elbow a little bit actually preloads that part of your back. All right, super awesome. Super awesome. Okay, so again, index finger on the jawline, middle finger's gonna be above, and that's awesome. Very good. You can relax that down. Another thing you can do if you're practicing this and you have a string like this, you can also, and if you're using a silverback, you could put a little piece of tape over that to just hold it on there. But honestly, learning to just take that middle finger and hold it on the loop until you get some tension and then bring it back, it's a very good technique too. All right, buddy, looking good so far. All right, good job, good job. Stance, grip looks good. Raise up. Good job. See, when you're hyperextended, do you see the difference in your clearance right here, how small that is? Because that's going to be the string and the arrow coming through. So just softening that. Now, one thing you can think about, and this is relative, it's actually relative to your grip. Because remember when I talked about the 45? So if you can imagine me taking this arrow and from your little IV vein right there, if I push this all the way through to through the tip of that elbow, that arrow is going to be in a position. Now, if you hyperextend and you turn that elbow down towards like 6:30 or 7 o'clock, it's going to be in the path.
Okay.
If you think about that tip of your elbow pointing to 8 o'clock to where it's a little bit more like that, that mirrors your 45 here. So this elbow position, if you're hyperextended and out, it means your grip didn't look right to begin with. See how it's all related?
Yeah.
So even though I didn't talk about the elbow, the fundamentals of the front hand are already dictating this other stuff. Looks awesome, dude. Okay, go ahead and relax one more time. So I'm going to talk you through everything that we're going to do to actually make a shot. There's one part of our equation, we've talked about anchor obviously, but we haven't gone through the other ones yet. But I just want you to kind of get a feel and an understanding. Now, when it comes to the anchor position, again, does it look right? What I do is I mirror the direction of this front hand, I mirror my thumb. So if my thumb is at a 45 and I raise my bow, I'm already adjusting this hand so that I'm mirroring that thumb position, because then as I draw back and it stops, it matches the shape of my jaw anyway. Mm-hmm. So when that stops, I'm able to just come over with minimum wasted effort and be in my anchor position, okay? Good job on that. Raise up, nicely done. Okay, yep, you were a little flat, good job, good job. Okay, that's nice. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do in this position, I'm just gonna let you feel like what this is gonna feel like. So when you're in that position, you're gonna be pulling against the back of your cam. Not too hard, but you're gonna be against the wall, okay? Then I'm gonna have you slowly relax your thumb off the safety. Good. Now, while you're aiming at that X with your front little grip, I want you to pull this elbow back to me. I want you to try to stretch that string in half and just keep pulling and keep pulling and keep pulling. It's nice. It's set pretty stiff right now, just so you know, because when I switch with them and I start working with them on this little training bow I have over here, the training bow doesn't have a lot of let off, so his holding weight's actually high, which will be really cool. But dude, that was an awesome surprise archery shot. That is exactly what you want, and what he just did is what separates the best archers in the world from the ones that just continue to struggle. It's that pull and the dynamic and the surprise, and it all comes from the fundamentals and the technique and this foundational process to get you into a position to where you can come through like that. So remember, with the anchor, does it look right? Does it feel right? So the first thing I'm going to talk about is I want to talk about the angle of attack, okay? So I want your release hand to mirror the 45 of the front, okay? Here's the other thing I want you to think about. And then I guess right here we're going to talk about, I tell people to think about a train track. You know, your jaw is a train track, and you kind of want those wheels on either side, okay? So mentally, I talk about the train tracks, helps me. And the third thing that I want you to think about is what I refer to as your rocker position, okay? So with a handheld release, you have the ability to have pressure here, you can change. 60% on your index finger, 40% on that middle finger, okay? And the reason that that's important, let me just see this here quick. The reason that's important is because with the release aid, especially this one, if you just start to pull with these fingers, all you're doing is making that loop go deeper into the hook. So when this comes off, it has to travel more around the hook. So when you put 60% of your weight on the index finger, and honestly, the geometry of these releases, our releases, because you're a knock-on person, the geometry is made so that when 60% is on the index finger and 40% on the middle, this thing is vertical right here, and it also puts that D loop in a place on the hook to where it's in the center of the cradle, and as you pull, it's coming off that hook clearly, okay? So when it comes to anchor, you've got your anchor, you've loaded it on, safety first, okay? I want you to raise up angle of attack. You can see it right here. Obviously, if you pull with this down and then you have to invert it full draw, that's going to be problematic and cause a lot of torque on your string. So get this correct now. Draw back till it stops. Get the train on the track. Make sure your rocker's good. Make sure you've kind of got that 60% load on the index finger. And once you've got that done, you know, you're going to let off that safety slow, just like that. You can let it off slow. And if you're already pulling too hard and it goes off as a surprise because you're already pulling hard, you should be on the target. And if you're letting off slow, it'll be a surprise and you'll know that you had too much wall pressure, but it's not going to be detrimental. What I don't want is a dump, okay? If you dump it, you change the shape of the hand too. You want to be able to just let that off without changing the shape of your hand. So right now, honestly, before we move on to those next steps, I'm just going to give you a little bit of time to be able to think of your angle of attack. And with this release trainer, you know, it's right here. You can look at it. It's not going to take it away from you. That's why I love it. So you can kind of look at your angle of attack. You can find that place, feel your 60-40, and then you can slowly just let your thumb off that, and then I'm gonna have you just try to stretch that string apart, tip of the elbow to the back wall. I'm just gonna have you work on this. I'm gonna watch him. We'll have him do a few here, but after that, what I would do with the student is I would encourage them to work with this on the string. Now, if you aren't having to do all of your lessons in one crack, this is an excellent time to pause and spend some time with what I'm talking with Bryce here about. What I did with my wife, with my son, they literally got lessons to this exact point. They got a release trainer, they got a silverback, and I had them just learning to make shots. I would tell them, if you watch TV, every time there's a commercial, which fortunately there's not as many commercials now, especially if you're on Netflix. But if there's a commercial, I want you to make shots, okay? And then when you're back at it, stop. Otherwise, that thing's awesome to have in your pocket to practice that, but just learning these fundamentals is gonna take you so far. If you want to start thinking about aiming and pulling through, I tell people just to use this knot that's extended and that's on the top. I tell them just imagine that is an aiming pin, and you can point it at something, let it float around, and continue to pull through until that activates. And once you get really, really comfortable with that, these next last steps are honestly very simple to incorporate. And if you have the time to take this systematically and spend a little bit of time going through it and taking these pauses, this is actually a great time, because the next steps actually involve the peep and the sight and everything on the bow. It sometimes is a little bit too much to think about in one crack. So not having a bow fighting against you, not trying to line up front sights and rear sights and understand the string and all that, it sometimes can get overwhelming. This is such an awesome way to do it. I'm gonna watch him do this. I'm gonna let him start getting really good at it, and then we will pick back up when he's showing me what I wanna see. But for right now, Bryce, let's see one that you got. Good job. Step one is what?
Stance.
Step two is what?
Grip.
Okay. Good job. Safety first, then teamwork. It's basic rules of the wilderness, the logging. Elbows where? There you go, buddy. Okay, and this is slow and smooth. Would you say you're 100% in everything right now? And if you are, then let off that safety slow, and just slow and smooth. That tip of the elbow is going to come to my voice. Just keep pulling through. Awesome job, dude. All right, give me freaking 20 of those, and then we're going to tell these guys the last things they need to do to be the best there is. Honestly, what do you think so far?
Feels good. I kind of like the silverback, the tension.
Nice.
Feels good.
I like it too. All right, everybody. See you soon.